Hello my beautiful PhD friends. So today we're going to go over how a PhD changes you, and we're not just going to look at like the skills that you pick up, but how it changes you as a person. We're going to go deep. If you're new to this channel, please remember to subscribe and hit that bell notification because I'm going to share with you everything I've learned about doing a PhD and my postdocs and getting grants and supervising students and all of the bad and great things that I've seen throughout that journey, and I'm going to share it with you, and I can tell you everything because I'm outside of the system and I want you to benefit from that knowledge. There is no doubt that doing a PhD is a life-changing thing. And it's not like you become necessarily an incredibly different person, but there is no doubt that a PhD changes you in some way. Now, looking back at when I did it, I think it would be inevitable that I would have grown up during that period, but I think I grew up in a very different way in terms of just my maturity, my expectations, the way that I approach problems and tasks, and the way I relate to people. I think my PhD certainly helped form all of those things, and that comes from a change inside. And so what I wanted to do now is go over the 6 things that I noticed about doing a PhD and how it changed me. What I do want to say though is that I think when you speak about a PhD, especially from where I am with the sort of 12 years of postdoc experience afterwards, is that you can look negatively on your PhD time because you've learned so much more about the academic system and its flaws and its failures and its biases, and it can really sort of taint the way that you viewed your PhD. But I just want to say up front that my PhD was actually a fantastic time. Sure, it was challenging. Sure, it had all of these issues, and I had to navigate, supervisors, projects, pressures, writing, thesis, like all of that stuff. But overall, I didn't become super negative about academia until I re-entered it as a postdoc. And that's when I really sort of saw its fundamental flaws for a person trying to navigate the academic system. So yeah, look, it is a positive time. And the one thing I always say is make sure you know what you want to do afterwards, because the path of least resistance and just tumbling through is no longer good enough if you're thinking about doing a PhD. So yeah, I'm not going to be super negative in this video because my PhD was genuinely a good time. Yeah. So the first way that a PhD changes you is that it genuinely makes you feel like you can do anything and that you can achieve what you put your mind to. It's a big undertaking. When you say to people, I'm going to do a PhD, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to go to the furthest ends of academia. And maybe it's because we're the sort of people who get their sort of kicks from, or their kind of feelings of self-worth from other people's opinions of us as clever people. And so it is no doubt that saying to people, I'm going to go to the absolute extremes of research and education just to kind of prove I can. And when you get to the end, you're like, oh yeah, I can do that. I can do anything. And it's certainly a really, really great feeling. And it certainly has helped me in the future in my sort of business endeavors, in, producing these videos for the YouTube channel. It shows me that consistent hard work pays off, and the reward may not be the next day or even a week later or a month later, but the reward can be many, many years later from the effort you put in early on. So I think that is great. It shows you that you can achieve what you put your mind to as long as you do the work. So yes, there's number one. Number two is the ability to completely dissect and understand problems. I think as a PhD student, there is no doubt that you become an expert problem solver, and that you overcome issues and you try things and you fail and you learn. But people completely underestimate the resilience you need inside to be able to do that. Like, becoming a problem solver isn't just about trying something and then it succeeding, or trying something and then it failing. It's about controlling the inside of you and make you more resilient to failing or trying. And when I try launching different businesses or different ideas or blogs or, this YouTube channel, I think a lot of people don't understand that, there is a lot of people that wouldn't do these sort of unknowns because of the fear of failure. But of course, as a PhD student, what failing it's not permanent, that it's a temporary thing. And so that's definitely something you get as a PhD student, is you understand that failure is only permanent if you let it be permanent. You can work your way through stuff. And so it does make you an expert problem solver because you have the resilience inside to try new things, to let them fail, to reapproach them. And I think that kind of robustness is what a PhD does kind of instill in you. And that is quite a superpower. For the third one, I actually asked my partner, Kate, what she thought about how I had changed throughout my PhD. And the great thing is, she couldn't really put a finger on any one thing that changed. Now that tells me that a PhD doesn't necessarily cause this massive shift in you or make you super negative or positive or amazing. But what she did notice is that it bumped up the things that I already had. So I've always been quite a driven person, not because I compare myself to what other people are doing, but rather I just set goals for myself and I say, I'm going to do that. Like recently, it was learn to sew. So I went to sewing lessons and now I sew stuff. I make t-shirts and underwear and shorts and skirts, and it's really fun. And that's a personal challenge. I launched a business, verbalize.science. I've also taught myself to code, and none of this is something I wouldn't have done beforehand, but now it's just kind of given me that extra drive to be yeah, now I can do it. So what I think a PhD does is it takes those components and those aspects of your personality and it kind of boosts them up, and it enables you to be if I'm driven, this is what I get. Or if I try to learn new things, I've always liked learning new things, and maybe you're the same because this is where you've ended up, i.e. a PhD in further education. And yeah, I've always learned new things off my own back because I like it. And so maybe a PhD just boosts up, gives it a little bit of a catalyst to those components of your personality, which enables you to kind of just keep on doing that for longer. I'm 35 now, but I still go back and learn new things. I did a radio announcing course. I did a podcasting course. I'm just always trying to learn. And I think a PhD showed me that learning isn't a thing that stops, that it always continues. And no matter where you are, I just always like learning. So there we are. Kate couldn't put an exact kind of finger on what had changed. But yeah, those aspects of my personality, I think a PhD has boosted. Number 4, about how a PhD changes you, isn't necessarily a great one. And I have a little bit of this in me still, but I've definitely noticed it in my other friends that have PhDs. And that is, they kind of think they're always right. And this isn't a great thing. Definitely one of my friends from uni, a PhD is something that kind of, I think, just solidified his own opinion of how great he was. And also for me, I think a couple years after my PhD, I was still seen as the clever one. And I did really feel my ego kind of swell and be yeah, you're the clever one. You're the one with the PhD. And that isn't a good thing. And I've worked really hard to kind of scale that back, and I've been reading lots of Stoic texts, and ego is the enemy is one I read recently, and they're not fantastic reads, I'll be honest with you, but it does help you kind of understand a little bit more about the ego and what you kind of have to push through to make sure that you're not just an asshole to everyone just because you've got a bit of paper or a plaque with your name on it saying you've got a PhD. You know, I don't like using the doctor title very much anymore. You know, it's important sometimes in professional settings, but all of that, I think, yeah, it is a slightly negative thing, and it's something that maybe as a post-PhD, people should go through training to kind of reel that ego back a little bit. The fifth thing about me that has changed is my appreciation for long-term goals. Now, all of the things I'm doing at the moment are long-term things. Growing relationships, growing businesses, growing blogs, growing YouTube channels. You know, like that is really a really kind of rewarding thing for me now, is that if something can be done and achieved in just, you know, a couple of weeks or a month, like I enjoy it, but I really get off, in a way, on long-term goals. You know, like what can I do now that will give me an impact in a year's time? And that has allowed me to, yeah, just kind of take on new skills, and challenges, and not be scared by the fact they take a long time. I don't know whether that's just me, but I think a PhD has enabled me to look much more long term than I used to, in terms of, you know, when you're doing undergraduate, it's always like, how do I get to the end of this year? How do I get to the end of the next year? How do I pass my exams this term, or whatever it is? And as a PhD, you kind of land, and then 3 years or 4 years or 5 years, or in the US even longer, as some of you have mentioned in the comments, that, yeah, that's how long these things take. So I've certainly relaxed internally with the idea of long-term goals, and allowing myself not to be super focused on the short term and the really kind of instant feedback and gratification of social media. I'm completely off social media, no Facebook, Twitter. I deleted my LinkedIn, even though I had, you know, 6,000 or so connections, just because I wanted to embrace that aspect of what I enjoy, and this kind of quick-paced media, social media feedback loop just squeezes that and makes you feel like you're owed something, you know, every week, every day, or whatever. So yeah, anyway, that was a bit of a rant, but it doesn't change the fact that I think a PhD helps you enjoy those longer term goals. And the sixth thing that I think a PhD changes is the fact that you become much more independent. And during the kind of 3 or 4 years of your PhD, you are becoming an independent voice, a researcher, a mind. You start to come up with your own ideas. You know, the idea is that you do become the expert in your field of that very small thing. Now, this was a bit of a disadvantage for me, because when I then went into industry, I was an explosives chemist for 13 months in Australia in the mines, and it was really hard to let go of that independence. You were starting to be controlled by, you know, bosses and their boss and the accountants who would come in and cut away all of the research because there wasn't enough money. And that level of independence is hard and difficult to lose, because it's just something you become used to. And so there is a little bit of a recalibration period afterwards where you do have to go, okay, I do have to submit myself, or be able to take a little bit of more direction from a corporate system. And so yes, a PhD certainly gets you used to independence, not necessarily completely in a good way. You do have to relinquish some of that control after you leave your PhD, because yeah, it becomes so ingrained that, hey, got an idea, follow it. Or you want to try that thing, yeah, no worries, no one's looking over your shoulder, and that changes, and that can be difficult to come to terms with. So that's how a PhD can change you. You know, is it good, is it bad? It's certainly something. So there are all of the ways of how a PhD can change you inside as a person. Luckily, there's no massive changes, but there are some differences and personality changes throughout those 3 or plus years. Let me know in the comments what you would add to that. And remember to subscribe and share this video if it's been useful for you. And I shall see you in the next video.